All right, so it seems like we got a little bit of good news here out of Bessemer, Alabama, where if you guys remember all the way back, and I think it was March, they had this unionization attempt that was put forward by some of their warehouse employees at this Amazon facility, and it would have been absolutely groundbreaking to have a new union at this facility because it would have been the first domestic US-based Amazon union, which obviously would have had rippling effects throughout the American labor force. Now, unfortunately, this effort did not succeed, obviously, and it really wasn't due to any specific, inherent hatred or dislike of union representation among the workforce. It really had a lot more to do with the incessant, ridiculous, and as we are about to get into, illegal anti-union propaganda tactics that Amazon was putting in place that ended up resulting in the failure that we saw at the end of the day. Now, again, according to More Perfect Union here, we have some great breaking news. The NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, has officially granted a rerun of the Amazon union election in Bessemer, Alabama, and as we reported at the time, Amazon illegally interfered in the March election, and the date and method of the new election are yet to be determined. So we got a statement here from the head of the RWDSU, Stuart Applebaum, who says, "Today's decision confirms what we were saying all along, that Amazon's intimidation and interference prevented workers from having a fair say in whether they wanted a union in their workplace, and as the regional director has indicated, that is both unacceptable and illegal. Amazon workers deserve to have a voice at work, which can only come from a union." So he is 100% right on all of that. And so what were some of these tactics that ended up being proven to be illegal by the NLRB? Well, we're going to get to a lot of the major egregious examples, but if you want a full and thorough breakdown and commentary on that, then I'm going to link this down below if you want to go and watch this amazing video that they put together. I'm not going to play it because you really should go watch it in its entirety if that's what you want to do. But I'm going to tell you about some of the most egregious things that they did throughout this entire process. So one of the things that they don't mention in this, so before we get into this, I'll tell you about this because this was really what was the determining factor that pushed it over the edge for the NLRB to say that their tactics were actually illegal, because a lot of the shit, even though it's egregious anti-propaganda or anti-union propaganda that Amazon is doing, a lot of it is technically legal or borderline legal for them to be doing because of how completely fucked and gutted our labor laws here in the United States actually are. But one thing that they did that was blatantly at surface level illegal was they had a mail drop box installed on Amazon's campus, basically at this warehouse right out front of the entrance to the warehouse, where workers were basically pressured into submitting their ballots or submitting their votes for the union effort at the Amazon facility, basically. And so the reason you don't want that to happen, the reason it's not supposed to happen at the facility itself, is when you have these union elections, you want the workers to be completely free from coercion and intimidation and oversight by the corporation itself, right? You want it to be completely independent. So Amazon basically asked the National Labor Relations Board, they asked the NLRB if it was okay for them to install this mailbox on their facility site, and the NLRB turned around and said, no, you can't do that, and then Amazon proceeded to just do it anyways. Okay, so they completely violated the law very clearly. They were obviously trying to intimidate workers and make them feel as though when they went to submit their ballots at this specific on-site location that there may be some sort of a backlash, or they were being surveilled or whatever, and who has access to the keys to this Dropbox. There are so many different problems with having that mail Dropbox on the location of the corporation itself, but even though the NLRB told them not to, they just went ahead and did it anyway. So that's really what ended up pushing it over the edge for the NLRB to say, no, we need to have a new election. That was absolutely ridiculous. But what are some of the other things that they were doing that were technically legal tactics, okay? Because we're going to be seeing a lot of these deployed again when there is going to be a new unionization effort, okay? It doesn't really matter how much attention we are bringing to this. If it's borderline legal or technically legal, Amazon is going to be deploying some of these tactics. So let's get into this. So they say the National Labor Relations Act, the federal law governing unions and workplace organizing, is supposed to protect workers' right to organize for better wages and working conditions. But the NLRA hasn't been updated in decades, while right-wing judges and politicians have steadily chipped away at the law's protections. Today, many of Amazon's worst union busting tactics are effective, intimidating, and mostly legal. Again, key point, mostly legal. So when workers started organizing in Bessemer, the company immediately hired anti-union consultants to the tune of over $10,000 a day. Okay, so instead of just letting their workers organize, letting their workers have a collective voice that they can use as a representation to get better benefits, to get better pay for themselves, to be able to live a stable life with this job at this Amazon facility, instead of just letting them do that and giving them the bare minimum that a trillion-dollar corporation like Amazon could easily afford to give them, instead of doing that, okay, they decide to spend $10,000 per day on anti-union propagandists. Okay, so this just shows you what their priorities are and how terrified they actually are of a union forming at Amazon, because again, it would have ripple effects not just at Amazon, but also among the entire American workforce. Okay, so one of the things that Amazon does in order to propagandize people or misinform people about this is they say, look, we're offering over $15 an hour, right? We offer $15 an hour as a starting wage at a lot of these facilities, and that's great, right? That's more than the minimum wage. Well, the thing that they don't tell you on top of that is that other comparable unionized warehouse workers get paid much more than the amount that they are offering at Amazon. So it's like they use these, sly rhetorical tactics to try to misinform people and say, no, you all have it great. You all have it fine. You're doing just fine. You don't need union representation. We like to sort it out just between the employer and the worker. We don't need a middleman coming in to disrupt this process. So they do all of these different rhetorical tricks to try to get people to think that it's in their best interest to not have a union, when the exact opposite is true according to all of the data. We know that there is a direct correlation between being a part of a union and having increased wages and having better benefits. It's just a fact, okay? So that's why Amazon doesn't want there to be a union, and why they're so terrified of it is directly because of that. They know they're going to have to shove out more in benefits and shove out more in fair pay for the labor that they are exploiting right now. So they continue. So not only consultants for $10,000 a day, but they continue with to create a climate of fear and intimidation. And the company papered the warehouse, including bathroom stalls, with anti-union propaganda, and sent workers daily text messages to pushing them to vote no. And workers' every move is tracked through the workstation cameras and mobile apps. And as representative and former labor organizer Andy Levin explained, Amazon's goal isn't to persuade people to vote no, it's to create so much pressure, anxiety, and fear that workers feel like they have no choice but to vote no, like someone crying uncle when they have been threatened relentlessly for days, weeks, and months. But unless the barrage of anti-union messaging contains clear threats of retaliation, it's probably legal, even if any worker knows that the implied message is that being pro-union could cost them their jobs. Meanwhile, employers can legally bar pro-union workers from talking about the union and building support at their place of work. So again, taking off one of the primary places where you would be able to actually talk to your coworkers about the benefits of unionizing. And it didn't just stay within the workplace, okay? One other thing that I don't think that they mention here is that Amazon literally altered the traffic light patterns outside of the facility, okay? They got the city to change the fucking traffic light patterns leaving the facility to try to prevent or minimize the ability for labor organizers or co-workers to be able to stand out there with flyers and talk to workers as they were leaving the facility. So they pulled out all of the stops, okay? Top to bottom, pulled out all of the stops. And a lot of these things are, again, technically legal, right? They're saying there, as long as they don't outright say, basically, if you vote for this union, you're going to be fired. As long as they don't outright say, if there's a union formed at this place of work, we're going to shut down the warehouse. As long as they don't explicitly say that word for word, then it's technically legal, right? So they can turn around and say, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe not. Maybe if there's a union, we won't be able to be as profitable, and maybe, I don't know, something happens and we have to cut our workforce or something like that, right? As long as it's not a direct threat, they are able to get away with a lot of this shit. And even if they break the law in some of these cases, the fines, the punishment for these corporations is almost nothing. And so they're thinking in their heads, we could pay a fine to the NLRB, we could, handle all of the consequences with that, because there really are no consequences. But they're doing the calculations in their head and coming to the realization that if they can get away with this, then they absolutely will. And even if they can't get away with it, there's not going to be much pushback because of how absolutely gutted and eviscerated our labor protections are in this country. So they continue here with more examples. Amazon forced workers to attend what labor organizers call captive audience meetings, in which the company representatives push workers to vote against the unions. And employers can, this is absolutely wild, so I'm going to focus in on this. Employers can legally lie about the unions as long as they don't do it with forged documents. It's the first bullet on the NLRB's explainer of what employers can and can't do. So captive audience meetings tend to be full of misinformation and intimidation. What the fuck kind of a law is this? What the fuck kind of a rule is this? They are able to not only by force withhold their workers, to force them to attend these captive audience meetings, but then on top of that, they're able to just blatantly lie and misinform their workers about the union. It's like, yeah, no shit, this effort ended up failing. If they're able to do this, if they're able to just lie at the place of work and intimidate people, of course it's going to fail. But this is what they're able to get away with. So employers monitor which workers attend these meetings, and workers who don't go can legally be disciplined or even fired. Amazon sometimes forced workers to attend several sessions a week, and federal labor law prohibits employers from threatening workers to vote no, but companies can use captive audience meetings to make ominous predictions about what will happen if they don't. And Bessemer workers report that Amazon representatives said the company would slash benefits and even shut down the warehouse if the union won. And if that sounds like a threat to you, it probably sounds like one to the workers too, whether or not the federal labor law recognizes it as one. It is very obviously blatantly an implied threat there, but they continue here saying, and even if workers file a federal claim saying that Amazon's misinformation crossed the line into illegal threats, by the time the NLRB hears the charge, it's too late and the company has already sown fear and made a fair election nearly impossible. So yes, obviously, I mean, listen, these are the tactics that we are 100% going to see deployed again by Amazon corporate when there is this inevitable rerun of this election. So it's absolutely fantastic news that the NLRB came to the realization that they blatantly and brazenly broke the law throughout this process. But in a broader picture, this just shows us how absolutely fucked our labor laws or labor protections or organizing protections are in this country. Okay, this is why you got to pass something like the PRO Act. This is why that should be on the top priority of everybody's list of what Democrats should be doing right now, right? If you pass the PRO Act, you give workers the ability to empower themselves so that they don't have to rely on bullshit, lying, corrupt politicians like those that are in power right now, leading both the Democrat and Republican parties. So that's why legislation protecting the right to organize act like the PRO Act is so important at a moment like this, and so important for the future of actual labor organizing. Because listen, you can, get them on these technical illegalities of where Amazon broke the law, but the reality is this is what it looks like all across the country. This is what all of these billion-dollar, even trillion-dollar corporations are able to get away with. And again, the consequences are minimum. I mean, if you ask me, I think if you cheat a union like this, if you cheat and propagandize your workers like this and break the law like this so brazenly without even seemingly giving a single shit, I mean, they literally asked the NLRB for permission to do something. They said no, and then Amazon just did it anyways. And you're telling me the consequences for that shouldn't be, I don't know, an automatic union granted to these workers or something like that? I don't know. I feel like we need to be having much more heavy consequences leveled against these corporations, whether it's in fines to the tunes of billions of dollars, if that's what it need be. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take, but we need to do things like pass the PRO Act and completely overhaul this absolutely broken labor protections that we have here in the United States.